Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Kevin McGovern with another Velocity RX podcast, bringing back special guest Chris O'Leary, the pain guy. But before we do that, I want you to go over here and subscribe to the channel so that you get all the latest information. And Chris was with me 3 or so months ago, maybe. A lot of
I think it was
views.
April.
April. A lot of, the haters were out, but the haters are always going to hate. Um, at that time, he had a slide deck of some really great information, and he has since added to that. And he's gonna present that today, and I'm going to listen intently and ask questions. So, Chris, welcome. Thank you again for coming on. I truly appreciate your time.
No, thanks for the opportunity. It gets me going, and as you know, it's kind of a depressing situation. It breaks some of the inertia. It's good to talk to someone else who believes that this is a problem, who cares that this is a problem. So, uh, let me go through. So the last time I had a deck that was kind of ad hoc. This is a little bit more put together. Uh, I will put myself in there just so I can gesture. Okay. All right, you got me? Yeah, looks like it.
Oh, look at that! You're in there. I like that.
Yeah, so I've the the idea, the purpose is to try to explain the epidemic, explain what's going on, why baseball pitchers can't stay healthy and what to do about it. Uh, the fundamental questions are why can't modern baseball pitchers stay healthy? Why are so many baseball pitchers getting hurt and what can we do about it? Uh,
Hmm.
just to establish a little bit in terms of credentials, I'm on Twitter and I'm widely criticized on Twitter, but I'm on Twitter to basically make these predictions to try to establish my model that I know what I'm talking about when I talk about the model. When I make these predictions, when I talk about what's going on and why, you know, most prominently, kind of most recently, is Sandy Alcantara. I saw this picture of him, this sequence of him, this video clip of him, and I knew that this was going to be. I knew he was in trouble, and I'll explain why I knew that in a little bit. Uh, to a point we were talking about before we got started, I take a lot of flack. This is some flack that I took yesterday from a guy that parallels something that Brandon McCarthy told me. Uh, and I had some conversations with Brandon McCarthy like 10 years ago or so. The gist is you should start actually offering solutions. Well, I do offer solutions. The problem is that they're not always taken, they're not always followed. And a lot of my solutions come down to patience and athleticism and training and strength and conditioning and those kinds of things, which aren't necessarily popular because it's a lot of work. But the general idea is stop trying to throw much harder over just a weekend. And I think that's where a lot of the haters and the problems come from because people are trying to sell velocity over a weekend, and I
Oh
understand that.
yeah, increased velo 5 miles an hour in a weekend. I've actually had two the guys left with a little bit more velocity, but and both left with Tommy John surgery. That was their parting gift. So, you know,
There's no free lunch, as I say.
no,
If you want my summary of what I should tell you to do, I'd tell you to study Aroldis Chapman. He's the only active pitcher who moves well. And classic, by that I mean Tigers era Reeboks wearing Justin Verlander, as we discussed last time. And then there's Nolan Ryan, Tom Seaver, Bob Gibson, a few other guys. But that list is getting shorter and it's not getting longer, I'll tell you that.
no.
Uh, so let's so kind of the TLDR is that the reason pitchers can't stay healthy is because everybody's running everything to the red line. Uh, there's a red line there for a reason. To an analogy I've used with the guys in Washington D.C. You know, NASCAR can get away with running to the red line because they can swap out an engine if they blow an engine. That's very different. That's much more difficult with a human being, as you know. You're spending guys, half your business, if not more, is working with guys who have gone to the red line and have blown out. And there's things you can do, but there's only so much that you can do, especially in certain situations. As things get badder, things get harder and harder to fix. Uh, a little bit of history, this whole process, this insight started with these two exact pitchers. I was studying. This is classic Justin Verlander. Notice the Reeboks, and then Kerry Wood, and this is like 15 or probably at least 15 years ago. And I just noticed this difference between their arms. I was studying Verlander for his hip to shoulder separation, his efficiency, uh, which is different than Kerry Wood, but then I noticed this difference in the position of their arms where Verlander's pitching arm is up and Kerry Wood's pitching arm is flat. I didn't have a
And and I will also tell you that Verlander's center of mass is more on his back leg than
right,
versus
right.
Kerry Wood, which is on his front leg, which is part of my theory of drift, drag, and
Yeah.
shrug.
No, and there are a lot of pictures of Kerry Wood with a locked out, fully extended, completely unathletic back leg. Uh, and I know exactly what you're saying, and I know those pictures because they look so terrible. They look so terrible. It's unfortunately it's classic Tom House, where he's trying to do, because you can't trust everybody to have athleticism. Basically, House couches the athleticism out of guys and gets them into these very rigid, very gimmicky positions, and it just then you have to throw completely with your arm, and the alternative, the right way to go about things, as Verlander used to do when he was wearing Reeboks with the Tigers, as Aroldis Chapman still does, is to get into the back leg, the core, to collapse the back leg, to do a lot of things that people would say is bad. But the fact is that what people say is bad is actually good. Just to kind of illustrate this with a couple more modern pictures, and this is, I spent 2016, 2017 chasing Verlander around. Basically, whenever he made a start in Detroit, I would go up, I would drive up there. I'd leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, be to Detroit by 6 o'clock, catch, the innings that he threw, and then get back in the car and get home by 4 at night, 4 in the morning.
Wow. Okay.
And well, but it was Verlander and he was great and he was going to get traded and he was only 7 or 8 hours from me. So,
All right.
uh, but you've got this classic position where, to your point, he's more back, his arm is up, his glove side is still closed, a la Mariano Rivera with the gun sight kind of idea. And this is the picture on the right is the one that really kind of helped me see this and put this together and coin the term flat arm syndrome. That's a minor leaguer named Trevor Clifton who never really made it anywhere because instead of his arm being up, his arm instead is flat. And that's where the term flat arm syndrome comes from. This is Shane Baz of the Baz or Baz of the Rays that with the
Hmm.
same kind of thing,
Same
flat
thing.
arm, a little bit of a Tommy John twist. If you compare the two, you can see Verlander's arm is up, his weight is still back, he's still athletic. Baz isn't as kind of forward as Kerry Wood, but he's still got the flat arm syndrome. Uh, a la Clifton. Clifton is where Clifton never actually made it to the big leagues because I would argue his timing problem is even worse than Baz's. Uh, Spencer Schwellenbach just broke the other day. This is one of the things that I was kind of texting you, or I was texting or DMing you, saying, I can't keep up with this stuff. I've updated this presentation 10 times
I
getting ready
know.
for this.
We I don't know if you saw much. I had the guy who runs the Tommy John site on Instagram. As soon as I see it, I go and he already has it up, and he just started like I did, predicting guys to get well, I predict the guys to get hurt, but he follows because he's in a keeper league in fantasy baseball. So that's how he started, and that's how I got into predicting guys like, oh, should we draft Jabba Chamberlain? I'm like, oh, no,
Right,
no, 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 never. Why? Well, because his arm, blah, blah, blah. How about Johan Santana? No, 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 no. And that's how
right,
kind of I got started predicting people. Same thing.
right. But just compare Verlander Classic Reeboks, although this is actually Under Armour Verlander, so this is 16 or 17. But Verlander with the Tigers, at least his arm was up. He's got
Hmm.
the Mariano Rivera gun sight. And Schwellenbach, he is doing the gun sight, but his arm is flat. Maybe Schwellenbach isn't as bad as Strider and some of the others, but Schwellenbach's not pitching right now. His elbow broke.
Hmm.
That's the reality of things.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'm trying to make this relevant. I'll go back in kind of the theory and the basics, but let's try to
look
illustrate
at
the
this. Look
theory.
at how could I mean I see this. Chris, I'm like, to me, this is, and we, to me, this is the equivalent of a 7 or 8 year old smoking his father's crack pipe in the
Yeah,
Bronx in
yeah,
New York. Like, how do you not stop this? Like, how do
right.
you look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's okay.
No, and they're, and this, and the older guys, we'll see Joel Zumaya and a whole generation of guys. This is, so this is Mizorowski. I would,
He's the next big thing. It's going to last about 12 minutes.
yeah, hopefully he'll make it to the end of the season. Uh, this is, when I was getting started, I would call this the inverted W. Technically,
Hmm.
this is the inverted V, which is only half of an inverted W, but he's got the point that matters where he's got this kind of hiked up elbow in a position of hyperabduction. Uh,
And
just
bone on tendon in his
right,
shoulder.
just setting himself up for an impingement injury.
Hmm.
Maybe he's got an acromion that'll allow this, that won't, that where this won't be as big of an issue as it would be for other guys. He'll break in a year rather than a month, but this is not a good position. And honestly, I thought we were done with this stuff. I thought, this is how Max Scherzer came out of college, and Max Scherzer, in order to be Max Scherzer, had to get away from this stuff. That's the only reason Max Scherzer has lasted. He did this kind of stuff at Mizzou, and he got away from it. I can't believe that people are
I
still
mean,
teaching this.
this is Mark Pryor, right?
Right, right.
It's the same position. And
No, and
wow.
it's incredibly hard to watch because the problem
Oh,
is, as I said back in 2010 to the junkies in DC, the problem isn't this position by itself. The problem is that what this position puts you in. So that by starting here with the elbow, by hiking the elbow so high, the pitching arm can't get up in time that the front foot plants, the glove side starts to pull, and the shoulders start to turn. So that Mizorowski's got this classic flat arm syndrome, all set up by this kind of elbow hike, this inverted V elbow hike. And you can see this just whenever you're just watching him elbow hike, foot's down, the arm is flat. There's a little bit of Tommy
and
John
late.
twist in there.
Yep.
But as the glove side is opening, the arm, instead of being up, it's flat. He's also a little twisted, which makes things even worse. And it's, and this is where you get into labral injuries and impingement injuries, and you're, as you said, you're rubbing tendons up against bone, and that's a that's a bad
That's
sight.
bad. And
It's
then
a
of course you're starting in that position and then you're making a max effort movement from that bad position.
Yeah, not just 95, but 100 or 102.
Right. Right.
And
Oh
I'll
God. Hmm.
and I'll show you some videos. So just to kind of sum up, this is, classic Verlander, 16, 17 Verlander with the Tigris, the arm is up. Mizorowski with the arm flat. Clifton, who helped me see the idea of flat arm syndrome with the arm flat. Now let's go to the tape and let's
Whoa.
address let's address one of the main objections, which is Chris O'Leary uses still photos. Yes, I use still photos to illustrate concepts, but I also use
Which,
video when I'm doing
right,
my
but
analyses.
a video is a bunch of still photos put together. Right. And
No,
when people say that, I said, okay, fine. Every
but is
photo should be an athletic position,
right.
right?
No, and that's a good point. But the thing you need to understand is as soon as you extract that frame from the video, you've destroyed all validity.
Right.
It's it's now a still photo, and you cannot trust it anymore.
It's ridiculous.
So don't trust anything that I'm saying here because these frames have been extracted from a video clip and
Oh,
which ruins all their validity.
there's throwing uphill. There it is.
Yeah, so this is Mizorowski at the All-Star game throwing 102. Classic elbow hike. That's the point of the line, is to trace the elbow hike as it goes up. And it's getting into this kind of hyper abduction. God, I can't even do that. It hurts my shoulder.
No, no. So that, is hyper abduction, right? So full, that means the shoulder blade hasn't moved to clear out of the way. Internal rotation of the arm. I mean, this, again, I've
Right.
said this. This is a submission move in jujitsu. This is the Kimura, right? This is where you put someone's arm in and hold it and they tap out. And now you're going to
Right.
throw from this position.
Yeah, that seems like a mistake.
Yes. And
And
then as he
you know,
rotates, the arm accelerates uphill.
right. And so because he hikes so much, the arm, as the foot's coming down, the arm doesn't have time to get up. So now his foot is down here, and his arm at best is flat
Mm,
as the rotation starts, and you can watch the B on the chest as he's going uh, from flexion to extension and then rotation. The B blurs, and you can see that this is load here happening, and his arm is coming under load. His arm, his shoulder, his elbow is all coming under load, while the pitching arm is flat and not up, which is the definition of flat arm syndrome. As a result, the
right
thing that
there.
we're going to look for is external rotation as kind of our double check to make sure that this is actually bad. And there it is. He's in a very kind of extremely 200-degree externally rotated position, which is really, really hard on the arm.
Oh, wow.
Extreme degrees of labor.
That's tough. That's tough to watch. That's
Right.
tough to watch.
Yeah, it's
But
bad.
it lit up the radar gun, so everybody was happy about it, right? And then they'll wonder, well, what happened? He's out. He got hurt. Well,
Right.
yeah,
And this is really the telltale position where uh the elbow has come off the line, so we know rotation is happening. We got the B is blurred out, so we know that there's rotation happening. And the pitching arm is, what is that? It's like 15 degrees of external rotation. So the pitching arm is going to flop over backwards, especially hard, which is going to give him a lot of stretch, which is going to give him a lot of velocity, but it's the human body can't handle that. And
no,
I don't care how many weighted balls you throw, there are hard and fast limits to the level of force that the human body can tolerate.
100%.
Yeah. Okay, so a little topical. I'll get a little homer on the Cardinals. This is Liam
So
Doyle.
so it's a homer for here too, because I just realized someone sent me a note. I guess he's from Derry, New Hampshire, which is,
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
about an hour and a half drive from where I'm at. So, or
And
an
that's the
hour
worst
probably.
because guys from the north are supposed to be good. You're supposed to get your pitchers from the north because they're not as screwed up. But
Yeah. Um,
so this is Liam Doyle, the number 5 pick taken by the Cardinals. I don't see anything of any interest. Well, this to me says Zach Thompson, who was the Cardinals pick of, like 6 years ago or so. Zach Thompson's on the disabled list. He's put up, I think, zero point 0.7 wins above replacement for his career. I don't see Liam Doyle being any better because he actually throws harder and he's more tricky with his pitching mechanics. This is every trick in the book. Uh, Picked up, I guess, at Coastal Carolina and at Ole Miss and now Tennessee. And this is, it's bad.
well,
They're seeing the same kind of flat arm syndrome pattern, lots of pulling on the glove side. Uh, I haven't looked at his back leg to see. Well, his lower body isn't terrible. It's not Kerry Wood bad, but you're seeing this kind of same,
well,
you know,
he's too much of his weight forward, right? Like
right,
I always say, like again, we talk about still photos. I always say every photo you should be athletic. So if you go back, like what can you do? No, one more, the when he's wearing the home uniform. Go back. So what can you do from that position without having to make another preparatory move? You couldn't kick
right,
somebody, you couldn't run, you couldn't do anything, right? Like
right,
if you did this in hitting, it's stepping in the bucket. If you did it in golf, you'd shank into the woods.
right.
And here it is, dragging the back leg, too far weight forward, arm down. No bueno.
Right. Yeah. Well, and we both have, that's one of Tom House's big points is keeping the back foot on the ground and coming up with his drag line, and that's just I don't have any.
I've got to get it like so the, I did take physics, but or we need to look into a physicist. When you have rotation, you should rotate around one stable axis. When you
Right.
put another point on the ground, now you're dividing that force, and that force goes up the kinetic chain, and you'll see it. It causes extreme layback. I just am not good enough to know. If we have a 200-pound man, 75% of his weight's on his front leg, 25 on the back, what that does. I've got to get I probably should look into college for I'm sure it's a quick physics, you know, problem to solve, but you need to spin around one leg. You cannot drag the back leg. And like maybe it's a toe touch, but these guys are look at his sneaker. Like he has got weight on that back leg. He is
Right.
dragging that like a landmine.
Well, and I see, there's good stuff to see and hear, the separation, but he's completely fighting himself. I
Hmm.
actually see a pitcher who has potential, and if he'd had patience and didn't want to pitch in the SEC, and I think the SEC is a real problem because, that's where all the tricks and shortcuts come in, is these guys want to be an SEC superstar, but and they are, he had a good season with Tennessee, but I don't see, I'd be really surprised if he's successful in Major League Baseball, if he even makes it to Major League Baseball because of all the tricks and shortcuts. And it's
What did they give him?
6.9, I think.
6.9. Wow.
Yeah, but right. So he's set for life. And this is like Forrest Whitley, and people are like, boo hoo, Forrest Whitley's got $3 million. Yeah, but Forrest Whitley isn't able to pursue his dream. And Forrest Whitley at least doesn't have a legion of Tennessee fans who are going to buy him drinks whenever he goes out to dinner because Forrest Whitley was drafted out of high school.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, Steven Strasburg's got, $50 million, but he doesn't have any use of his right arm. So,
Right. And yeah, it's debatable whether he can actually hold his children or his wife.
right. Yep.
It's horrible. Uh,
Horrible.
Right. So just this kind of basic pattern of, the foot's down and the shoulders are turning and the arm is flat and not up. It's just, you've got the Tommy John twist here. You've got a lot of internal rotation, not nearly enough external rotation. Yes, he does achieve good separation, but his glove side is dropping, his front shoulder's dropping. He's not doing what Mariano Rivera did. He's not doing what classic Verlander did. Let me let me take a step back, and I don't know if we talked about this. Were you taught to throw at all?
No, there wasn't. Like there was no when I was coming up in high school, there was none of there was no one like me around. I
Right,
mean, we were lucky if our school had like an athletic trainer. Right there, the only I mean, I graduated high school in '89, so the only like travel sports was basketball. They had five-star basketball camp, right?
right,
That's when I remember the first time people went away for sports. But no, you played in your town league, and then maybe your town had an all-star travel team, and yeah, there was no one. You do things naturally, but that's what I say.
right,
No kid in the world picks up a ball and gets into an inverted W. None.
right. And this is a kid throwing very naturally. He's
Hmm.
making the classic mistake of trying to pull his shoulders around with his glove, which is something that you got to clean up. But this is a natural, slightly longer arm action. And this is what most kids will do. When I was a kid, uh, we just we just paired up. Mr. Blackburn at the start of the season would have us pair up, and we would just throw and we throw and we throw and we throw and we throw, and he wouldn't teach us anything other than, try to hit the other guy in the gloves so the
Yeah, it
other
was
guy.
always hit the target, follow through. My dad would be like, you have to follow through, bend your back, that kind of thing, but nothing like it's happening today. But then again, everything is statusized today.
Right. Well, and so I actually know when I was coaching at Harris Stowe, I met a guy who said he knew kind of how Justin Verlander I was taught, and I believe this guy. And basically, Verlander wasn't taught anything. Justin Verlander wasn't taught anything. Ben Verlander was taught all the nonsense, and I would argue that's why Ben Verlander never went anywhere, and why Ben Verlander moves so completely differently than Justin Verlander. Because Justin is like 10 years older than Ben, and Ben was taught all the tricks and the shortcuts. And the Verlander brothers really do illustrate how much things have changed. Justin had a very natural kind of arm up, slightly longer arm action, the Mariano Rivera gun sight kind of thing. But the foot's down, the arm is up. There are no tricks and shortcuts. Uh, you've got this longer, mostly natural arm action. I don't really, it doesn't really matter to me whether you're short arming like a catcher or long arming like Verlander is. Just kind of stay away from 90 degrees. But most importantly, get that pitching arm up.
But now Verlander's much different than this picture, right? He changed, right?
Yeah, I've got pictures that show the changes, and that's
And
that's one of the things that came up yesterday.
he's
Was a guy
jamming
was
that front leg into extension. I know that.
Yeah, he did do that, which isn't any good for the knee or the hip. Although it hasn't really kind of hurt him. Most of his issues so far have been shoulders. Although you could argue that kind of rigidity on the lower half can cause
Hmm.
problems that kind of flow up the chain. So
Agreed.
yeah, that's not a good thing. But so the difference is we went from this kind of old model where kids just threw and they threw kind of, 80, 90% of the kids threw naturally well, like Verlander, to now you've got all these tricks and shortcuts being taught. Tom House's flex T position, the power T, the idea of pointing the ball at second base or the center field, which leads to what I call the Tommy John twist. And then you've also got the inverted W. Uh, and it's illustrative to compare Matt Harvey to what this
Look
kid is being taught. And unfortunately, Matt
at that
Harvey,
foot drag.
right, and then look at that foot, yeah, look at that foot drag kind of locking up the hips and everything. Unfortunately, neither Matt Harvey nor his dad were as skeptical as this kid. I love the kid's eyes. He's like, "What are you talking
All
about?
right.
This
Well, I
feels
know,
weird."
like I have. So I mean, classic. You don't go to the heart surgeon who's had three heart attacks and a bypass, right? So I've had a, I get clients that go to other places and then eventually find their way to me. And one of them was a house disciple that took me about a year to break him of all the bad habits. But, you know, they were showing Otani of what to
Yeah,
do. Like,
right.
what? I'm like, oh, hitting? They're like, no. I'm like, no, pitching. And I'm like, how can, and this is nothing against Otani, but how are you as a pitching coach in good conscience showing Shohei Otani, who's blown out twice and will, for all intents and purposes, is on the road to do it again, as a
He
model of
will. He'll
what
break
to
again.
do? Well, I'm
Right.
assuming probably now that UCL is probably, like like a vacuum band is probably about that thick, right? God knows
Right.
what they have in there.
Yeah, I don't know
But
whether he internal braced or not.
oh, I'm sure he's got screws, wires. I'm sure he's got everything. Well, and I said to someone the other day, I'm like, he's going to do something that's going to cause nerve damage, and then it's going to
Right.
affect his hitting, and then
Right.
someone needs to go to jail.
Right. And I've got video or I've got frames of Otani. Now I've extracted them from the video, so
Oh,
people will
oh
tell
my
us that's
goodness. Don't do
people will
that.
say that's invalid. Let me keep going. I'll get
Yes,
to the
absolutely.
Otani stuff. Uh, but so I actually talked to Ed Harvey, Matt Harvey's dad. Ed wanted me to look at Matt for the inverted W. Matt Harvey did not do the inverted W. He was clean, but the problem is that what Matt Harvey did was the Tommy John twist, which Ed got from watching Roger Clemens. And Clemens did do it at least to a degree, although Clemens had to take steroids in order to survive his injury problems. Uh,
Right.
and Clemens was a little bit different, such that with the Yankees, Clemens' Tommy John twist didn't create a timing problem. While his arm would be here to start, by the time he got to foot plant, he was more here like a catcher, as you can see in this kind of picture with the Yankees. Uh, Matt Harvey was taught just every horrible thing in the book. This is the power T. Uh, different people call it different things, but this is the idea of trying to stay long and fingers on top of the ball into foot plant, into heel plant. And this is really what started with Matt Harvey is, this idea of trying to stay long, holding this T as long as possible. Uh, and Matt Harvey used the Tommy John twist to help create this resistance, which yes, helped him throw harder at a younger age, but it worked by overloading the pitching arm. Then you get into the inverted
Mm.
W. This is Brandon Woodruff who just came back, but how long will he be back? With kind of the classic inverted W, where he's lifting both arms above the shoulder. And again, God, that hurts to do. Uh, Now imagine trying to throw 95 miles an hour. It's not good. Here's Mark Pryor with the classic inverted W with the elbows above the shoulder. Here's where we're getting into the problem with Mark Pryor, where he's still, his shoulders is starting to turn and his elbow is still well above the level of his shoulders. Uh, you can see here, this is the real problem with Mark Pryor. And again, to the points about impingement that we've been talking about, the problem isn't just that Mark Pryor's arm is flat when his foot is down and his shoulders are going to start to turn. The problem is how high Mark Pryor's shoulder or elbow is above the level of his shoulders, which is a problem that I've identified with Paul Skeens at a minimum. I don't know if Skeens is going to go full Pryor, but I certainly have concerns for Paul Skeens in terms of hyperabduction and,
And
impingement
his work, I
injuries.
mean, he's like, talk about redline. I mean, he's redline with his workouts, right? I mean, he's
Right.
just everything is like full, 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 everything.
Well, and that's I had another guy kind of come after me trying to say the problem is these guys aren't strong enough, and I think that's nonsense. Uh,
Absolutely nonsense.
right. There's strength is good. Nolan Ryan had a lot of functional strength. Tom Seaver had a lot of functional strength, but there's only so much that you can do to minimize, to deal with, to try to condition your way around a problem like what Mark Pryor was doing. Conditioning is good. You can get a lot of conditioning from throwing. There are specialized exercises that guys like you can provide that can help target specific stuff. But there's only so much that can do. You have to move fundamentally well and move from good positions. And my real concern with the state of the art of things is that kids are being taught these bad positions. Here's a kid being taught to move like Matt Harvey did.
Hmm.
And people will say, I'm teaching you to move like Matt Harvey. And the thought I always have, and you will have, is, yeah, but Matt Harvey's out of the league, and he had a couple good years, and then he was done.
And
And
they
it's the
took a
same,
rib, a thoracic outlet. I mean, it's like incredible.
right? If right, I think that having to have surgery in order to survive your pitching mechanics, I think that's a big deal.
It's yes, very much, very much.
Uh, Again, I'll try to go back to my credentials a little bit. I do a lot of this tweeting, and I'm not pounding on guys. I'm trying to make these predictions, and if you can predict stuff, that means that you can prevent it. So here's, Schwellenbach and Strider moving basically the same, and this is me pointing this out before Schwellenbach broke, uh, before his elbow broke. We'll see what else breaks with Schwellenbach. Uh,
Yeah, what's his? How long is he out for?
It's at least for like a month or so, because
Okay.
he's got to let his elbow heal, but I think there will be follow-on injuries after that. Here's a little kind of another summary. It's not just the higher velocities, it's how the higher velocities are being achieved. I don't think velocity is the problem per se. I think there are two paths to velocity. You've got the Aroldis Chapman, classic Justin Verlander, Nolan Ryan, Tom Seaver path to velocity, which is athletic and patient. Uh, and then you've got the kind of the modern approach to velocity, which is very tricky. It's all tricks and shortcuts. It's the weekend velocity bumps. And the drive lines of the world are trying to compensate by throwing in weighted balls and weighted ball problems, and it just doesn't work. Fundamentally, the problem is modern pitching mechanics. The problem is drive line, the Texas Baseball Ranch, which got Verlander, Tread, and most of the people. Most of the velocity gurus are teaching bad stuff. Even some of the guys that I've liked in the past are now teaching the bad stuff. I guess because that's where the money is. It's they see it as easy money.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and again, this is the difference. What's changed in the game. This is Justin Verlander, I think 2009 versus Kerry Wood in the same kind of time frame. And you could see these problems coming in advance because they were in just fundamentally different positions. And again, you can see some of this lack of athleticism in Kerry Wood, how kind of tall and upright he is versus Verlander, who's a little bit lower, got a little more flexion, and there are other parts of Verlander that are a lot more athletic.
Wood looks very, very rigid.
Right, right.
Very
No,
rigid.
and here's Nolan Ryan. This is the picture of Nolan Ryan that really kind of blew my mind. First and foremost, from a timing standpoint, the front foot is almost down and the pitching arm is almost up. Uh, that's, why did Nolan Ryan last? And it was because of Nolan Ryan's timing. And, look at how much closer to the ground Nolan Ryan's back leg is, his knee is. This is kind of the drop and drive, Tom Seavery, more athletic, throw with your whole body, throw with your core, not just with your arm kind of approach that Verlander used to do, doesn't do as much. You know, in terms of flat arm syndrome, what I call a timing problem, again, Nolan Ryan, the foot's almost down, the arm's almost up. Uh, Nolan Ryan with the Astros, the foot is down, the arm is up.
Up,
Justin Verlander, uh,
foot down, arm up.
yeah, Verlander, the arm is up, and then we get Kerry Wood, the foot's down, the arm is flat. And what happened to Kerry Wood? What happened to Mark Pryor? This is what happened. Verlander, the arm is up. Kerry Wood, the arm is flat. Uh, these are very obvious differences. And, really what's changed over the past 20 years? This is what's changed. You've got 90 degrees of external rotation, basically. All modern pitchers are throwing from this basic flat arm position, the same position that got Kerry Wood. Hardly anybody is throwing from this arm up position, not even Justin Verlander. And I've got some slides that go to that. Flat arm syndrome, flat arm syndrome. Walker Buehler, what's going on with Walker Buehler? Well, he's got this Tommy John twist where the thumb comes down, you're trying to point the ball at second base. And that's bad for Walker Buehler because it limits the external rotation at front foot plant. So that increases the overload, which allows Buehler to throw hard, but it's a trick and shortcut and there's no free lunch. Kumar Rocker's the same kind of thing. The Tommy John twist, the thumb is down, the arm is flatter. It's all kind of overload. And you can
Hmm.
see these differences when you compare Rocker, classic Verlander, and Bueller. These are very, very different, fundamentally different movement patterns.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These are great, Chris. These are great.
No, no, it's thanks for goading me into doing this. Uh, Schwellenbach versus Verlander, up versus flat. So what? Okay, so let's get to the question of so what happened to Justin Verlander? If I like Justin Verlander so much, what the hell happened to him? Uh, as I was tweeting yesterday, I flipped to sell on Justin Verlander right before he broke. Uh, so I actually know Brent Strom. Uh, we've had a lot of conversations about Mark Mulder and pitching mechanics when Strom was with the Cardinals. Uh, so I was emailing Strom in 2019, 2010 when Verlander was trying to boost his velocity and was talking to Driveline, and I'm like, Brent, this is bad stuff. I can't believe that anyone would mess with Justin Verlander, but Ron Wolf for the Texas Baseball Ranch did. And you can see these differences
Now
here.
he just for a timeline, he changed him and then he blew out, correct?
Right, right.
Okay.
Yes, well, and Verlander, so actually Verlander tweeted at the end or after just after the end of the 2019 season, Verlander tweeted, I'm going to make some changes to try to boost my velocity and stay healthy, and all those changes completely backfired. So then Verlander needed Tommy John surgery in I think it was 2020 or whenever
Kind of like Shane Bieber, same thing.
right,
Let's win some Cy Young awards and then let's change. You
right.
know, like
And, and the difference is this is Verlander with the Giants is now doing the Tommy John twist, whereas Verlander was in this kind of like high five position. Now he's twisted and he's rotated his palm 90 degrees, which is completely consistent with the conventional wisdom, but it's also limiting Verlander's external rotation, creating a timing problem. And this is why Verlander is having trouble getting back to health. And you can actually see that Verlander lately has been actually kind of doubling down on this. This is pretty bad, but this is even
that's
worse.
worse. That's really look at the drive. Look at all of his center of mat. He
Right,
won't catch up. You saw, just don't.
right.
He can't catch up.
Right. So and it's the worst thing is Verlander is he's doubling down on the conventional wisdom, and the conventional wisdom is absolutely destroying him. I did see a tweet from a Giants reporter suggesting that Verlander maybe was trying to work with his timing, changing his timing and his location of his handbrake. So maybe Verlander is queuing into some of the stuff, but Justin, give me a call. I can explain what's going on. Uh,
Right.
and just look at what's the difference with Justin Verlander? Why isn't Justin Verlander of the Giants the same as the Justin Verlander of Detroit? Well, look at his pitching arm. Look at his palm. Here he's pointing the ball at third base in a very neutral, natural position, and here Verlander has fingers on top of the ball, pointing the ball at second base or center field. That pronation difference leads to a timing difference, which leads to just kind of everything falling apart. Uh, Verlander looks a lot more like Kumar Rocker and Walker Buehler than the Justin Verlander of old. And it's really horrible and tragic that someone has actually done this to a pitcher like Verlander, who can't actually get a freaking win anymore. Uh,
No,
he's
right?
he's never going to make it to 300. It's just,
No, no one will ever make it to 300. No one
and
will make
again,
it to no one will make it to two. No modern day person might make it to 200. Besides the guys in the league now. Yeah,
I, I think 100 is in question as well.
that's yeah.
That's how fast things are changing and collapsing. But again, Verlander pointing the ball at third base, Verlander fingers on top of the ball, pointing the ball at second base or center field. Uh, I will say, so the Dr. Mike Marshall guys will tell you that they know everything. I think
Mm,
it's obvious that they don't. Uh, they're
ad
really,
nauseum.
they're really just kind of crazy.
Some guy,
Uh,
some guy hammer. I try to read his stuff. Oh, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You're using language that's not even English.
well, and that's
Pathokinetic, like you're making up words.
Well, and that's kind of a mark of insecurity. I am smart enough that I know that I'm smart and I'm willing to use small words. And you get these insecure Dr. Mike Marshall guys who can't get away from the gigantic made up words. Kind of
Completely made up words. Yeah.
right. A sum of this is that late is bad. Late,
Hmm.
the flat arm syndrome, what got Justin Verlander, what got Schwellenbach, what got Strider, what's getting everyone, that's bad. But getting the arm up early is just as bad. Dustin May. There are a lot of pitchers out there. This is actually this early thing is what led me to get a little skeptical about Dr. Mike Marshall and kind of clued me into, okay, he's not all that he says he is, and he's not all that his guys think he is. This is Freddie Garcia with the White Sox, who Dr. Mike Marshall at the time would say Freddie Garcia moves basically perfectly because his arm's up. His arm isn't just up on time, it's actually up early, and that's good. And I'm like, okay, well, so obviously Freddie Garcia is going to be completely healthy. Well, a year after uh, winning the World Series with the White Sox, Freddie Garcia went down with shoulder problems and never really came back from those shoulder
No.
problems. He went through the Yankees and, did
Yeah.
nothing with the
Oh, yeah.
Yankees because
No.
his shoulder
Hurt.
was fried.
He was hurt. Yep.
Right. And that was not because his arm was late, but because his arm was early. Here's Dustin May, and this is some of what happens when the arm gets up early. When your arm gets up early, you then often have to do things to kind of create tension and allow your arm to kind of reload. So what happens is Dustin May's arm gets up and then it has to flatten out again. And this is where you can see Dustin May is flattening up, flattening out again. And this is why May can't stay healthy because he gets his arm up early, so then he has to create a timing problem in order to kind of refine that energy. If he would just kind of be smooth and get his arm up on time, have an easier time staying healthy. Uh, you know, TLDR, what's changed this idea of just throwing, lining up and throwing as I was taught, it sounds like you were taught versus all these tricks and shortcuts. Uh, I found this picture the other day, which kind of sums up the state of the art of things. This is, from a tweet by the RBI program, which is great, but look at what people are being taught. Look at what this kid is doing, pulling hard with the glove side while the arm is flat.
Drift, drag, and shrug. Yep.
Right, exactly. This poor kid is not copying Justin Verlander. He's copying Schwellenbach, and his glove side is actually worse than Schwellenbach's. Uh, these kids they're never gonna make it out of high school if they even make it to high school because they're being taught to overload their arms at a very young age. Look at the glove side. Here's Verlander doing kind of a Mariano Rivera gun sight thing. This kid could never do that because his glove side is actually long gone. Some of the names, Paul Nyman is really kind of the Johnny Appleseed of a lot of the worst stuff. He invented the inverted W and scap loading. Uh, Ron Wolforth in the Texas Baseball Ranch is the guy who got Justin Verlander. Tom House is the guy who got Mark Pryor. Fortunately, House isn't really doing baseball anymore, thank God. And then you've got Kyle Boddy of Driveline. All these guys are kind of doing the same thing. Kyle Boddy made one argument that actually made sense, which is Boddy tried to combine the mechanics stuff of Paul Nyman and the conditioning stuff of Dr. Mike Marshall to see if Marshall's conditioning stuff would allow pitchers to stay healthy and to survive the Paul Nyman, Tom House mechanic stuff, and obviously that's been a failure. It doesn't work. Conditioning is good to a point, but you can't compensate for fundamentally flawed movement patterns. Uh, you
Correct.
know, the problem isn't necessarily velocity, it's quickie velocity versus patient velocity. You know, the difference between throwing and pitching. I think throwing is a natural action. The problem is that pitching is what's unnatural. All this kind of regimented doing it 100 times at maximum effort. That's very different than throwing stones at a rabbit until you kill it. Those are very different things. And fundamentally, this is an economics point, which is there's no free lunch. People are selling a free lunch. They're selling the tricks and shortcuts. Uh, this is a quote that I just got from someone, which is that, saying that these, the bodies are going to revolutionize the game of baseball. And really fundamentally, they've done that by teaching everyone to move like a reliever and not a starter. And fundamentally, there's no free lunch. Some of the answer is athleticism, like you see in Aroldis Chapman, natural mechanics, patience. I had a brief conversation with Justin Verlander, I think when he was on a plane. Uh, and he really kind of stressed the importance of patience to his development. And as we said last time, I think, Verlander did go SEC. He went to Old Dominion, which is not exactly a baseball powerhouse, but that gave Verlander the time to develop. But even Justin Verlander wasn't JV until his second year of pro ball. That level of patience is lacking. In contrast, you've got the Alex Reyeses who never went anywhere, unfortunately, because he was all tricks and shortcuts and injuries. Uh, and I'll go back to credentials. I never liked Alex Reyes from the beginning. The first time I saw Alex Reyes in March of 2014, I thought he made me nervous for both elbow and shoulder reasons, and that's exactly what happened to Reyes. Uh, and you can compare the twisty, flat Reyes arm action versus Seaver, who got his arm up, Koufax, who got his arm up, uh, Ryan, who got his arm up. I will say, I actually know Kyle Boddy from 2008. Kyle Boddy came to me for help, and I have a real problem with Kyle Boddy because Kyle Boddy is selling the stuff that got his own shoulder. I
That's amazing.
find
That
that
story is amazing. It truly is amazing.
basically for people who haven't heard the story, Kyle Boddy learned the inverted
And this is
W.
his email, right? That he sent to
All
you,
right. This
correct?
is this is the exact email. You can email him back. You've got his email address right there.
There you
Uh,
go.
so I was working with Cal Body or talking to him via the Baseball Fever website, which he references here in 2007. And Body was taught the inverted W and did it and screwed up his shoulder. And then Body came to me and I'm like, you can't do the inverted W. The inverted W is what's causing your problems. And so I taught him a bunch of, I basically gave Body an early version of this presentation and Body tried it and it worked on himself. And Body doesn't teach that. Body
No, he
teaches,
teaches just the opposite, or he teaches and they call it what, the staircase or something?
right, the spiral staircase. Uh,
Ridiculous.
let's talk about, Jeff Passan has written about me. Jeff Passan is a liar. Uh, I called the Matt Harvey injury for a writer named Matt Giles for this is New York Magazine, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Ohtani since people, all right, we've already gone through Mizraowski. Here's Ohtani. Uh,
Mm.
so you've got the same kind of he's Otani isn't quite as inverted as some people, and Otani is more of a horizontal W than an inverted W. But Otani has the same basic problem where so here Otani is at roughly 0 degrees of external rotation. Otani's pitching arm is relatively flat, and that unfortunately is when his pitching arm starts to come under load. His front foot plants, his shoulders start to turn. Watch the D kind of move as he moves from flexion to extension, and watch how much his elbow is moving here, which leads to the external rotation. So this is why I don't think Otani is going to last with the Dodgers. I don't see any significant change.
They made nothing. Nope. Nope.
And this is something that is actually taught in Japan, pretty widely taught. Most of the Japanese players will do the inverted L or the inverted V, if not the inverted W. And one of the differences is that they're pitching every 7 days, not
I was
every
gonna say
5 days.
they only pitch once a week, like in
Right. And
college.
that's
Yep,
and that's a big difference. And that's it's
big
the same
difference.
thing. It's the same thing for Liam Doyle in the SEC and in college. They're only going, they're the Friday night guy or the Saturday guy.
Hmm.
They're going every 7 days. Those 2 days makes a real difference in terms of rest and recovery. I don't have any belief, any faith in Otani's ability to stay healthy because you know, his pitching arm is flat and not up when his shoulders start to turn. All right, what do you want to, any things you want to talk about?
No, I think I mean, you covered this beautifully. I mean, it's just, yeah, I just, I don't know how anyone just can't see it. I don't understand why there's an argument. I don't understand why there's an attack. And the only thing I can come up with is, I've traced some of these trolls that have gone after me, and it's all about money, right? Like you'll find out they've learned from Tread, they've learned from Driveline. And one of my buddies once said he was involved. Someone we knew got hooked up in like a multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme and lost a bunch of money. And he said, dude, no grown man is ever going to want to admit out loud to themselves that they've been hoodwinked, right? So they're going to have to lash out and make you the, where'd you get your PT degree? Like, dude, I forgot more. I forgot more about human movement than you'll ever know. Um, I just know that you can't throw a baseball from excessive abduction, internal rotation. It is the worst position for the shoulder to be at. And if you're teaching that, you are insane and you are injuring people. And people get to major leagues, that's 0.001% of the population. Good for them. They've made money. God bless them. But you don't teach Chris Sale's mechanics to a kid, right? You don't teach Mark Pryor's mechanics to a kid. And there's therapists, there's people who do what I do, who are literally teaching that nonsense to adolescents, maybe for the, lights up the radar gun for a few, but I want to see what happens when they're 20. And we never see, oh, so and so did this. Well, we're so and so 2 years later. Like I know where all my players are.
Right.
They're all healthy. They've
No,
chosen to stop playing if they're not playing.
and that's one of the things that really bothers me. I'm still bothered by the story of Bobby Madrich from 20 years ago, who was with an inverted V guy with the Mariners. These guys still bother me. I still think about Joel Zumaya. It really bothers me how quickly people can kind of throw away players, how quickly they disregard these players. These are human beings. And to the point about Strasburg, this is a guy whose his life is changed. Yes, he's rich, but
Hmm. Well, what's the value of your right arm, Chris?
right,
Right? If today you lost it in a freak wood chipper accident, well, what's the
right.
value of your right arm?
In constant pain. How much pain is Strasburg in? And whenever I see guys dying of overdoses, I
Hmm.
wonder, are they in constant pain? Is pain the reason that they ended up overdosing? What was it about how they moved that led to this constant pain, that put them in this position of constant
Hmm.
pain, that led to
Yep.
their overdosing? And that really bothers me, and it keeps me up at night. And that's kind of why I'm at it, and that's why I appreciate, what you're doing, because we're kind of the lonely voices in the
Oh,
wood talking
yeah,
about it.
and absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But people are starting to listen. People, because once you show them, right? Because
Right,
everything I'll bring them in, I'll prove. Okay, look at, let's put you in this
right,
position. Let me test your strength. You have none. Now,
right.
what if I just did? Look how strong you are. Why would you throw from that
I
position?
know, just
Ever? Just
dropping
do
from
this.
here
Just do
to
this. Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Right.
right. And people are like,
Right. Are you going to punch a guy from up here, or are you going to punch a
never.
guy from down here?
Never, never. But like I said, most of the trolls, and now, was it Felsick, the guy who's like
Slicing.
Blysick? Watch the money with that guy. Something's going on there. He's talking about that,
Right.
plyo balls are good all of a sudden. What? You're gonna give a
Well,
16-year-old kid
I,
with who can't move and throw him plyo balls? Come on.
he was Dr. James Andrews' biomechanics guy, and
Mm-hmm.
now that the Andrews gravy train is drying up,
Mm-hmm.
I see
Follow the
Fleissig.
money.
Right.
Yep. Follow the
He
money.
is following the money, and there are other
Yep.
guys that I used to respect who are following the money. and
Yep.
teaching the bad stuff, teaching the quickie stuff, and it's a real problem.
Big time. Like you say, there's no free lunch. Well, Chris, thank you again. We have to do this. We should definitely do this every so often. We've got to educate parents, right? Everything starts. I don't know how many parents are brainwashed by this nonsense, and it's all they want to do right by their kid, but there's just so much bad stuff out there that we need to yell loud and get people to wake up and be like, no, this is crack. We don't do crack.
Well, and I'll start putting together an end season wrap up that kind of shows the pattern so you can follow. All right, here are all the guys who broke just this year, and
Hmm.
notice how they're all doing the same thing. And we'll come back and at the end
Do
of the
it again.
season, sometime during the off season, we'll hit it again and
Do it
hit it
again.
again.
I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Well, guys, again, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Visit velocityrx.org and help us save 1 million arms, one at a time. Thanks for listening.